Good evening, everybody. Thanks for hanging in with us. The Overtime, the Sports Talk version. I'm Corey Miller, the pastor of Payne, alongside the captain, Kerry Rich, former Gamecock point guard. Now he's a radio analyst and TV analyst. He does it all. But, of course, this time of the year, Captain, we got so many things happening. We're going to spruce it up a little bit, talk a little bit of high school stuff, of course, national stuff. A lot of kind of hot sports topics are out there. But I want to start tonight right here, something that's near and dear to your heart, of course, high school basketball. When we talk about young kids making that leap to college, an intriguing one here. Tevin Mack from Dreer, of course, one of the best players in the state, one of the best players, I think, in the country, at least from a pure shooting standpoint and scoring standpoint, was committed to VCU with Shaka Smart. Shaka left, took the job at Texas. Of course, they let him out of his letter of intent. Now he's basically a free agent for college basketball. And he came out 7 schools, and the Gamecocks weren't one.
Not surprised that the Gamecocks were not one of his final 7 schools. Early on in the process, I knew South Carolina wouldn't be one of his final 7 schools, and a lot of it had to do with the mere fact that there hasn't been any direct communication between Tevin Mack and the University of South Carolina basketball staff. I know there has been communication between the staff and the mother, but Ms. Paula Mack, but there hasn't been any direct communication between Tevin Mack himself and the staff. And early on, I think that let all of us know that maybe South Carolina wasn't going to be his destination pastor. But the one thing that surprised me more than anything, and I've been following recruiting here in Columbia for a long, long time. I could take you back to 1986 when the late AC Floyd great Rodney Taylor was ushered around Columbia by Rolly Massimino of Villanova. I could take you back to 87 when Barry Manning won the beach ball, the prestigious beach ball tournament MVP. And he was touted as one of the best basketball players in the country, the North Carolinas, the Georgetowns, the North Carolina States. So many of those big programs came after Barry Manning. So I've been following this recruiting here in Columbia for a long, long time, going back to 86. And the one thing that surprised me was when the 7 schools came out, even if South Carolina wasn't going to be one of the schools that he seriously considered, I think from a political standpoint, from a political correctness standpoint, and I know you don't necessarily care about being politically correct.
I do not.
But
I do not.
I think just from that standpoint, you always got to find a way to maybe allow that hometown school just to be in the mix, even if that's not going to be the school that you go to. You still got to allow it just to be in the mix. And because what happens is it opens the door for gross speculation. It opens the door for so many questions. Well, what's going on? Frank Martin and the staff doesn't want Tevin Mack. Tevin Mack doesn't want to go to South Carolina. And when you release your 7 schools and your hometown school, and that doesn't just go for players here in Columbia. That just doesn't go for players here in South Carolina. That's an unwritten rule throughout, recruitment, whether it's football or basketball. And I was a little bit surprised with the 7 schools being released that, again, even if you're not serious about going to South Carolina, for the sake of political correctness, I would have included South Carolina.
And that's why I love this part of the sports topic, because this is where I'm going to disagree with you. I mean, it's like the political correctness. What? Oh, wow, that sounds great. But herein lies a young man that if South Carolina is not one of his schools, and there's no need to sugarcoat and say, this is one of my schools, whether it's I don't like it here, I want to get away from home, whether it's, I can't handle tough coaching, whatever the situation may be. I don't know what that is, but for Tevin Mack, and I kind of have an idea how this worked, being that I had a son last year that went against the grain too and went somewhere else. So my thing is, Tevin Mack, if South Carolina's not one of his schools, then so be it. Then I think he'll have a chance, Captain, to say, when he announced, because as media we can say, hey, Tevin, why wasn't South Carolina in your top 7? Now you give him the chance and opportunity to say, well, this is why, and nothing personal. Or I just wanted to go to Georgia. I wanted to follow Shaka to Texas, and I didn't want to get the fans' hopes up. And then you know how that is, and then thinking, well, we in the mix, and then he drops the bombshell. So I don't agree with your political correctness.
Well, maybe my track record. I just talked about going back to 86, 87, watching those guys get highly recruited. And, all of them didn't go to South Carolina. And if you don't want to go to South Carolina, that's fine. Tevin Mack is from Columbia, and we as a community, we as a city, we as a state, we should support, and we should support Tevin Mack wherever he goes.
Absolutely.
But from the standpoint of again, because it opens the door for gross speculation. It opens the door for so many questions. Well, why isn't South Carolina one of the seven? I think us in the basketball world, we knew Tevin Mack probably wasn't going to end up at South Carolina. Selfishly, as a former basketball player at South Carolina, I wanted Tevin Mack to come to South Carolina. I see what the women are doing. I see the success they had with all of the local kids coming together and sharing in that success together. But the reality of it is maybe it's not a good fit for Tevin Mack. And if it's not a good fit for Tevin Mack, this is all about compatibility. And if two pieces don't fit together, then it's best for Tevin Mack to go wherever Tevin Mack feels comfortable, because you're not going to accept coaching if you're not comfortable with that particular coach. I don't care who he is. You're not going to accept it if there's no compatibility.
And something tells me that Frank Martin style and Tevin Mack style may not mix. Just saying, just knowing Tevin Mack and knowing Frank, I'm just saying it may not mix, so it might be a good thing. When we come back after the break, we'll switch gears some high school football. I started my spring football tour, high school football tour for 2015. We'll tell you about that. Plus, a kid right in our backyard again, maybe headed upstate. That's all coming up next right here in the Overtime. All right, welcome back to Overtime. Corey Miller alongside the captain, Kerry Rich. Now we're going to switch gears and talk some football, high school football it is. I started my high school football spring tour 2015, plus a young man that was found himself as one of the best players in the city, in the state last year, Denzel Johnson of AC Flora. Finally, captain, have made the ACT score. He's good there, but being that now we're at the end of school, he's got to take the exams. And he said basically he's clear with the ACT, but still, because it's cumulative, he's got to make his exam scores and everything has to balance out. If that happens, he's in the backyard. Speaking of gross speculation, if he makes his score, that means he's grossly going to Clemson.
Oh, wow. Well, kudos for him.
Yeah.
First of all, kudos for him making the score. And you can imagine that's probably a heavy burden lifted off of his shoulders. And it's going to be a nerve-wracking 2-3 weeks as he continues to try to make the rest of his grades. And you're always rooting for a kid to fulfill that dream, a kid rooting for a kid that's now going to have the opportunity to continue his playing career. So you're crossing your finger. You're hoping that this kid does everything absolutely right to put himself in position to continue on with this dream.
Denzel's an athlete, plays offense. He had about 60 tackles on defense, and I think 900-plus yards or so, 12 touchdowns, catching the football. You can see his great hands. He can play several positions. But he says, and I quote, he says he got a score back on yesterday, and he told us to TigerNet. Now he's waiting on his test scores once he takes his exams. But he said, yeah, Clemson is still in the running. Now, Dabo Swinney did say that he was really recruiting this kid hard because Dabo, I think his kid played for Daniel, and they played here in Columbia at AC Flora in the playoffs, and he saw him up close and personal and really liked what he saw. Now, he's a 3-star athlete, but you can see the kid got mad skills. He can do a lot of different things. 6'2", 190 pounds, but we wish Denzel Johnson of AC Flora, hopefully he gets his grades right. Hopefully, if it's close, if it's close, I'm just hoping if it's close.
What are you saying, Pastor?
I mean, they have like a scale, you know what I mean? Like based on how other people perform in the class. Sometimes you got to give a little boost. I mean,
just a little.
There's nothing wrong with the kid. It's worked hard. That's what they say. He works hard. He tries hard. There's nothing wrong with giving the kid just a little bit of a nudge, right?
Well,
a little boost.
We shouldn't be on this TV set advocating such a boost. We shouldn't do that.
I ain't saying a big boost. I'm saying
a small boost.
If he needs like a 90, he got an 88. I mean, come on.
Well, we shouldn't advocate that.
I'm just saying, you know what? I'm just, as you said, we're not, there's no grossly speculation, as you would like to call it, on this show.
But. Yeah, but I think it's a neat story because of how this kid was recruited. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of parents don't understand. 80% of prospects are recruited through being on the field, being on the court with the other targets. Because let's just face it, if you got 10 schools coming in to see this one particular player, all 10 schools aren't going to get him. But if you play well enough, if you shine, if you find a way to stand out with your effort, with your production, then now you become somewhat of an interest for that particular coach. And it's always neat to hear those type of stories when a kid gets seen through a coach coming to see somebody else. That's the art of recruiting. 80% of the prospects get recruited by coaches coming to see other players.
No doubt about it. And of course, again, I said Dabo's son was playing for Dane. Now, I'm just really kidding about the boost, so don't write me, don't email me. I'm just kidding. He makes his grade, he makes it. If he doesn't, that's just what he has to deal with. But our high school football spring tour 2015, with 6 schools already that we visited. If we count today, that makes 8. We caught up with Coach Stepp out at Lexington. Went out there and watched those guys on yesterday, Captain. They got some good players returning. I like Trey Mitchell, the linebacker. He's a stud. He got good feet, good in coverage, good against the run. And, of course, I like Josh Stepp. Now, they only won 7 games last year. He talked about playing late into December. They didn't do that last year, so they got some good wide receivers back. This is a team that's going to bounce back, I think, and be very good. Of course, you know, Stepp is from a football family and a really, really nice coach out there. I like how they moved around. Also, kind of the other end of the spectrum, we went to Columbia High School yesterday, and Willie Alford, the guy who played at South Carolina and the Vikings, when you talk about Columbia High, when you see, when I have a chance to go to all these schools and really see their facilities and, you know, even from the uniforms and things, you see the difference in how money, and I want to get into that one day and just look at, because I want to see a program like what Willie Alford has at Columbia High School and the Keenans and C.A. Johnson, some of these other schools, that have the same equal opportunity as some of these others, so they can compete at a better level.
And it makes a difference. It makes a difference when student athletes have the same opportunity or that even playing field, like we call it. And I know through my readers and just my dealers in the community, I think there is going to be a concerted effort to improve those facilities in Richland District 1. And it is a difference. And I've always been of the belief that as student athletes, you look good, you feel good, and you play well. And if you have the facilities that are consistent with those things, I think it really improves the overall product. But from everything that I'm hearing and from some of the things that I'm reading, there seems to be a concentrated effort, a concerted effort to really improve the facilities in Richland District 1.
They definitely need it, and I wish those guys nothing but the best. Of course, Lex is doing a great job. We're at Spring Valley, a lot of new coaches, so make sure you tune in to our high school football spring tour every night in our second block of sports right here on Watch Fox News at 10. When we come back, we'll talk about some USA basketball. The Lady Gamecocks, or let me just say the women's Gamecock basketball team, sending 3 players to some trials. That's pretty impressive. We'll talk about that with the captain when we get back. All right, welcome back again. Thanks for hanging out late with us, I should say, with the captain and I as we talk some sports with you here in the overtime. Of course, the Gamecock women's basketball team, we always talk about them some kind of way, whether it be the head coach, Don Staley, or the players doing something special or getting some type of an award or an accolade. Well, again, 3 players from the Gamecock basketball team, the women that is captain, getting a chance to go compete for the USA. I mean, Aja Wilson, who was on the circuit last year, so was Tiffany Mitchell. Now throw in the big girl, Elena Coates, in 3 different segments of USA basketball. But it's really impressive for your basketball team and head coach Don Staley that your players are getting this type of opportunity.
Well, it speaks to the success that the basketball team has had. It speaks to the national relevance that this basketball team now has when it comes to women's basketball throughout the country. And when you think about Coates, when you think about Wilson, when you think about Mitchell, I think perception says that's the nucleus of this basketball team. And those are the players that are returning next year. Those are the players that will certainly carry the heavy load. But when you see these type of accolades, when you see this type of recognition, when you see these type of invites, it certainly speaks to the success that this basketball team has had. It speaks to, again, the national relevance it has in women's basketball.
No doubt about it. Aja Wilson, of course, was on that under-18 team last year, and she'll be competing for the under-19 team. Now, Mitchell and Coates are competing with 54 other players for a 12-member team. And, of course, that gets tight. When you think about it, there's going to be 54 great players because, you know, there's no garbage that's being invited to the USA basketball trial. So when you look at Tiffany Mitchell, she's an All-American. You look at Elena Coates, when you're talking about her size, her strength, her rebounding ability, and what they've done just in the SEC and in the NCAA tournament. I mean, she's not going to face any better players than they faced all of last year.
Yeah, but the good thing about these ladies now competing for a roster spot is simple. They're battle tested. Look at what they've had to go through this year. Not only go through, but the role each one of those players played in the success this basketball team had. And by going through this season and sharing in the success, confidence-wise, they're on another level. Confidence-wise, they feel like they're individually as good as any other basketball player in the country. So that gives them an edge when it comes to competition, when it comes to competing for that roster spot. You feel good about yourself when you have that success, especially when you're doing it on the big stage like those women were able to do. So you walk into the gym with your chest stuck out just a little bit more. There's a confidence, there's a mantra, and because of that, that may be the edge that could help get them and maybe solidify a spot on one of those teams.
Well,
I expect great success from all three of them.
No doubt about it. And I think it's great that they continue their play and get a chance for this to happen even in the early spring and May 14th, I believe, through the 17th, the trials are. So I think those girls are going to be in really good shape. Now, you're speaking of confidence, you're speaking of a mantra, and you're speaking of grossly speculation. Some may be speculating why there's 3 players on the men's basketball team that's not coming back, but that's reality. Frank announced that this week. We'll talk about that, get the captain thoughts on those 3 guys moving on and maybe some guys coming in to replace them. That's all coming up next, right here in the Overtime. All right, welcome back to Overtime. Corey Miller alongside the captain, Kerry Rich. Now, we're going to really get in his backyard when we talk about men's basketball. Of course, we didn't expect to hear news this time of the year, but Frank Martin announced this week that 3 guys were not going to be returning to the basketball team captain. Of course, Reggie Theus Jr., remember the name, Reggie Theus, NBA player, Shamik Shepard, and Demetrius Henry. Now, Demetrius Henry was the only one really that we even going to have any kind of footage or film on that played. And I'm just going to say, probably the other 2, sometimes in recruiting, we talk about it a lot, right? Sometimes you just make a mistake. I mean, sometimes you think this guy might transition or get better or fit into what you're trying to do, and it just don't happen. I think this is the case. I mean, I can't say that for Henry. I think he could play for sure. Maybe his commitment level wasn't there, but the other 2 guys, I don't know. Reggie Theus Jr. want to go close to home. That's fine, but this is my opinion. I'm not saying something I know. I'm just saying something I think that I just don't think those 2 guys, other 2 guys, were good enough, in my opinion.
Well,
grossly speculating. That's what it is.
Well, I think it's fair to say when it comes to Reggie Theus, he didn't develop quickly enough.
Right.
He didn't develop soon enough in year number 2 going into year number 3. Might have been a little bit over his head, but you got to take a chance on players like that when you're trying to build a program. You got to take a chance on players that are right on the cusp. You're hoping that they develop. He wasn't necessarily a guy that developed. Shamik Shepard, I think he's a kid that was also caught in the mix with regards to having to fill a roster spot. Even though he had some athleticism coming out of high school, you look at the position he plays, just undersized to play that power forward position in the SEC, especially with the way recruiting is going for South Carolina. Demetrius Henry is probably the one guy that certainly could have been really good as a junior. You look at this basketball team when they were on that nice little run, he was an integral part of that. He was finishing the game. No, he wasn't scoring a whole lot of points, but he was a post presence for this basketball team. He blocked a few shots. He altered a few shots. And you're going to miss that because you hope by year number 3, you're ready. You have an understanding. You have a conviction because of what you've gone through in the previous 2 years. And now you're surrounded by other juniors and seniors. That's the one part that was disappointing for me when it comes to Demetrius Henry. And also think about this, which is why I wasn't surprised. When Frank Martin suspended those 2 guys, Shepard and Henry, he had a chance to allow those guys back on the team, to reinstate those guys back on the team before they went to the SEC conference tournament. That did not happen. Not a good sign. You know that when something like that happens, that kind of lets you know maybe time is nearing an end for those particular players, and that certainly was the case. Wasn't surprised at all. Now it's about trying to satisfy those voids that are now in place because the players that are now departing.
Now let me ask you this. Okay, they're gone. They're going bye-bye. And so now that opens up space for other kids to come in.
Yes.
And when you talk about this basketball team, they need help. I mean, they got some good guys coming back. You got P.J. Dozier coming in. You got Chris Silver's going to come in and help. But just reading from the outside, you know more about recruiting. I only go by what I read and guys they are visiting with. And seems like there's a couple other guys that Frank got a shot at that can come in and help this basketball team.
Well, the good thing about it, and you mentioned they need help. The good thing about this basketball team, your nucleus that's returning, guys that have been through the water, so to speak. Thornwell, he'll be a junior. Notice he'll be a junior. So now those guys are battle tested. Those guys are 1 year older. Thornwell wasn't healthy last year. But now you add to the fact that you're bringing in 3 kids, 3 prospects that will play immediately. And Gregory, the 6'4" guard out of D.C., of course, P.J. Dozier is going to make a mark on this basketball team. He's going to make it so much easier for everybody else. Silver would be one of the best athletes in the SEC. You add that to the juniors and seniors that are in place, it makes for just a little bit more confidence as a fan knowing what you're putting on the court. Make no mistake about it, this basketball staff isn't finished.
Right.
I think it's safe to say you mentioned that you see a lot of, what you're reading, you see a lot of players that South Carolina is involved in. Well, I think they're still trying to sign 1 or 2 more. I know they want some more beef at the post position, and they're still looking for that big guard, that big scoring guard. That's why it was important for South Carolina to hopefully land Tevin Mack. He would have satisfied that void for South Carolina. Those are the 2 spots, just talking to Frank and talking to the staff, those seems to be the 2 positions that kind of need to be filled right away with a sense of urgency.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll definitely get those filled. I know those guys are working tirelessly on the recruiting trail to fill those voids or emptiness. And you love that. 2 words we learned today, or phrases I should say. Political correctness.
Yes.
And grossly speculating or speculation. So take that with you to bed tonight. We appreciate you hanging out late with us. We'll be back next week with more high school baseball and soccer playoffs are going on. Of course, our spring football tour as well. So many other things coming right here in Overtime, the Sports Talk.